We're moving swiftly on because you've such an incredible program. And here at South Summit, we like to go from awesome to awesome. We are overwhelmed by the luxury that we have of our opening slots this morning. Our next speaker is an absolute icon in the world of entrepreneurship and particularly across Europe. This founder is one of the most celebrated, definitely the most celebrated entrepreneur in Europe, has founded several companies and now an incredibly renowned venture capital firm. We are super excited that this next fireside chat is going to be facilitated by one of our own local, exciting entrepreneurs, a guy that's moved to Madrid many years ago, but is originally French and has an extensive career in technology as well. I'd love to invite to the stage, please, Alexis Bonte from eRepublik, who's going to be facilitating our fireside chat with Niklas Zennstrom, founder of Atomico and originally Skype. Thanks, Niklas.
Thank you
so much. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Niklas, thank you so much for taking the time to come to Madrid.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah, awesome.
It's very, very good to have you. And I'm just going to shoot and start with something I think is close to your heart. Europe.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to start Skype? How many people here know about Skype? Still a few hands up. The rest probably don't know about it, but okay. A few people still know about it. So what made you choose to start Skype in Europe rather than in the Silicon Valley, especially the time where you did it?
Sure. Yeah, so back then, we started Skype in 2002. We launched in 2003. And back then, no one really thought that you could build a successful tech company in Europe, that you had to be in Silicon Valley to do it. And that's kind of, if you look at the numbers, it probably was true. But I think we were a bit contrarian and said, we can build it from Europe. And there were several reasons, because first of all, I lived here. This was my home. I was in Stockholm at the time. But also, we already had a fantastic team of some of the best engineers I've worked with to date. Who were in Europe, in Estonia. So we thought that moving the company wasn't really an option. And I thought why can't we build it from Europe? And I thought that actually the ambition that we had was pretty big. We wanted to build a global company. We thought that the global telephone industry was ripe for disruption, and we needed to, and specifically the international phone calls were ripe for disruption. So we needed to build a global company. So coming from a small market, a small country like Sweden, 9 million people, it's actually a good place to, mindset to think about a global business. So I think Europe is actually, back then, it was a challenge to do it from Europe, but it worked, and I think there was some advantages, because we have multiple languages and people here travel a lot. And
because can you remind us, what was the year you started Skype?
2003.
2003. So that was right after a little bit after the dot-com burst and all that. So did that make it more difficult? Do you think it was more difficult?
Yeah, we could not raise money. Literally everyone who was involved with the internet in the dot-com era got burned. And people literally thought that it did not work. And investors did not want to invest. So, I think we pitched to 25 investors all around Europe, and, rejection. Why don't you do something smaller? Why don't you do something local in your home market? Why do you think so big? So that's kind of many times when I thought gee, these guys, why can't they encourage me to think bigger? Okay. So that's maybe sometimes back then when we thought that after Skype, we need to disrupt venture capital as well.
And staying on Skype for a little bit more, what do you think is the thing that made Skype so globally successful? And in particular in very difficult places like Brazil and places like that. What do you think were the keys?
I think we addressed a big pain point. People inherently want to communicate with their friends and their family. And so I think we identified a market that was ripe for disruption, because the telecom companies charge very, very expensive fees for international phone calls, when essentially it doesn't cost more to make an international phone call than a local phone call. So then you have an opportunity, because the incumbent is behaving in a very monopolistic way. But timing, I think very many times when you launch a company successfully, timing is everything. And what we could benefit from was the adoption of broadband. Back then in 2003 when we launched, that's when we started to have a critical mass of broadband. And you started to have Wi-Fi. And this was really before the smartphones, but we built Skype for the smartphone. But still people use the laptops
So you built it for the smartphone.
That was a vision. That was we called Skype was Skyper was the first name, so peer-to-peer in the sky. So that was before the smartphone you had the PDAs, but they were not good enough for not enough processing power.
Okay. And did you ever imagine it would reach this scale? I mean, when you were doing it?
When we started the business and we had to make some kind of presentations to investors and some kind of business plan, we thought there's an opportunity, there's a big opportunity to disrupt the global telecom industry. We said, if you can take 2% market share, that's huge. But we also realized that the likelihood to make that happen is quite small, but at least there's an opportunity, and therefore, if we don't shoot for that opportunity, then we won't get there. So when we launched and we started to have a really fast growth, really went viral, people asked me, did you plan for this? No, but, or is it completely overwhelming? No, said this is according to our potential that we thought that we had. So we executed according to the potential. So in a way, we were not completely surprised, but it was you also realizing that it's a small likelihood that you actually, make it happen.
Yeah. Well, personally, I have to tell you, thank you very much for Skype. Yeah. And yesterday evening we were at dinner, and one of the people told me, I think it's one of the companies that actually has had a really impact on people's lives. And she was telling me how the grandmother of her kids was basically able to see her kids, although she was living in another continent. Yeah. And I think sometimes, what I love about Skype is that it's an example of how technology can really have an impact and change people's lives. Yeah. So that was a wonderful one. But since then, you've moved on, and you've started Atomico, a VC fund, which is probably, I would say now, the leading VC fund in Europe. So, can you tell us a bit more about Atomico?
Yeah. So we really started Atomico out of the frustration when I was an entrepreneur, when we were dealing with VC firms both here in Europe and in the US, where pretty much all VCs were people who did not come from an entrepreneurial background. And maybe super smart people, super nice people, but they hadn't been in my shoes before, so I couldn't really identify with them. So I thought that there was really a need for an entrepreneurial venture capital firm with people who actually done it before. So what we've set out to do, and this was actually 10 years since we started, so it's our 10-year anniversary now, so we kind of moved, we made a lot of investments, a lot of great companies, but basically what we have done, we have built up an organization which is much more operational than other venture capital firms. So we have people who've been part of scaling some of the most successful companies, obviously several people who've been part of Skype. So we have Carlos, who was my country manager in Brazil. He's helping companies to expand into Latin America. We have the country manager from China and Japan. But then we also have people like Ben Grohl, who was doing growth at Facebook, Neil Was, who was doing international for Uber, Sophia was doing marketing for Spotify. So we have people who have really been part of scaling some of the most successful companies. So what we can do is that we can invest in companies just after they have this product market fit, when they are kind of going from the product innovation to thinking about scaling. So we can really help them to turbocharge scaling.
So basically an entrepreneur that is able to get investment from Atomico, he will get a little bit of help from the person who basically helped Facebook grow, and from the person that helped Uber go from 2 countries to 50 countries in 2 years. Yeah, that's a pretty.
Yeah. So and I think what's important here is that we have so many good startups now in Europe. It's amazing. It's night and day compared to 5 years ago. There's so many really good companies. But the thing that really needs to happen now is we really need to encourage more of these companies to think bigger, more ambitious, and more aggressive in their scaling. And having people who've done it before can really help them to scale faster.
So now that everyone is dreaming of having Atomico as an investor, so maybe you can give us a few clues here in the room about what kind of companies does Atomico look for?
Yeah. So as I just mentioned, we're looking at companies who are using technology It's very important that there's underlying...
Using technology?
Yes, enabling technology, making great products that we think have a potential to be a category-winning product. We would like to see companies who have some original business models. We don't like kind of copycats. We like to see companies which have an opportunity to achieve international category winning. But most important is the founders.
The founders.
The founders are always, if I look back to all the companies we invested in, but also other companies we have not invested in, who become very successful, actually it's really the founders who make all the difference. So we spend a lot of time getting to know the founders and taking references, asking people who know the founders really well, because it's really, really, really hard to build a business, and it really takes extraordinary people to really make it happen. And you need to want to be willing to win at pretty much any price. You need to be a great leader, visionary. You need to be a great salespeople person, and you need to kind of see around the corners. So founders are super important. So that also means the ambition level of the founders.
I mean, something when I was getting to know you and we met a few years ago, something that always comes back in your speech is the word disruption.
Yeah.
Where I think one of the things you were saying, Skype was about disrupting a major market and all that. So is that another thing that Atomico looks for?
Yes.
Great founders, yes, but also a product or something that disrupts a very big market? Is that very key as well?
Absolutely. And what's so exciting today is that there's more opportunities to disrupt. In a way that you can think, well, everything's been disrupted. Telephone has been disrupted, music's been disrupted, maybe travel has been disrupted, but in the next 10 years, probably all sectors will be disrupted. In the next, so in the next 10, 20 years, like all leading companies in every sector in our economy is going to be a technology company. So there's so many more opportunities ahead of us. But I think what's important when we talk about disruption is also that you need to see companies. Disruption is not necessarily something that's just destroys things. It's something that creates something that is more efficient, creates efficiencies, and ultimately great value for its customers, and doing that in a way where you can actually have some kind of a network effect, some kind of sustainable model. So you want to see, at the end of the light, you need to have a business model. And I have this experience myself before Skype, I did Kazaa, which was music file sharing, which was very, very disruptive, but we could not build a business model on it, so it failed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke a bit before that in your criteria of choice, the founders were extremely important for Atomico. And you touched briefly on some of the skills that you're looking for founders or for founding teams, to be more precise. What do you think are the key skills, the key things that make a difference between someone who is just going to be an entrepreneur and founder and someone who's actually going to build a disruptive business, something that's really transformative and has global impact? What differentiates the entrepreneurs from the incredible entrepreneurs?
I think, if you go and pick up a few books, if you read a book about Steve Jobs, the Jeff Bezos book, or Elon Musk book, that's where you have the answers. You have people who are relentless, and people who are really, really, they have a big vision, and they can see through that vision, but they're also super focused and not get distracted because when you're building a company, there's always a lot of opportunities, and people tell you should do this and you should do that, but you need to have a clear vision about things. But ultimately, you can see it in the eye of entrepreneurs. It's like these are the people who really have it in them and having that really willingness to win. The reality is also that a lot of very successful entrepreneurs are maybe people who are they maybe have something to prove, and they having usually some kind of not maybe always the perfect gone always the perfect schools and all those kind of things. It's I think that these are the things that you maybe when you spend time with such an entrepreneur, you kind of realize it maybe that this is something special.
Yeah.
But it also requires to do things at the right time. The timing is so important because and sometimes it looks fantastic when these companies are executing, and the timing is fantastic. But that was not necessarily always planned. And you just kind of things you're just playing out in certain ways.
Okay. And coming back to Europe a little bit, what would you say today are the biggest challenges for European entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I would say that the biggest challenges for a European entrepreneur are the biggest challenges as you have for any entrepreneur in any other place in the world. as I mentioned, it's really hard to build a business. When we speak to our entrepreneurs in our companies and others, always the biggest challenge is finding the best people to work with them, finding the right talent. That's always the biggest challenge. And I would say actually in Europe, we have actually an advantage compared to the US because we are producing twice as many STEM graduates every year compared to US. We have 1.6 million software developers versus 1.4 million in the US. And we have 4 times as many developers per venture capital-backed company. So actually, we have a better situation when it comes to talent. Now, what we still are lacking behind maybe are people who've been part of scaling companies like Google and Facebook and Uber and some of the other really, really big companies. But that's really something that happened a lot in that era. Since I launched Skype, there have been 44 companies here in Europe reaching billion-dollar valuation, which kind of is amazing. It's something to celebrate.
41 companies in Europe.
Yeah, 44.
44 companies have reached $1 billion valuation in Europe since Skype.
Yes, and this is something that 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would never say 44. I would say maybe 10, maybe maximum. So this is something to celebrate. I mean, I think that the European tech ecosystem is on fire. It's amazing. We have more and more companies being started every year. We have more money coming into the ecosystem. This year, just the venture capital investments are up quite significantly compared to last year. So it's very, very healthy, actually. The challenge, of course, that we have is that we have living in a fragmented geography where each market is maybe not as big as say, in the big advantage a US-based entrepreneur has is that their domestic market is very big and very homogeneous. So while Europe is bigger, but it's too fragmented, so it's harder to penetrate. But what we like to think about is that, one thing we always said is that great companies are coming from anywhere, but it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. What we care about is where you're going, and we like companies to go global. So I think that if you're from Europe, you can maybe, because if you think about your home market is not big enough, you need to think international earlier on. So we would like to encourage entrepreneurs to go beyond their home market and think international really from the outset of when they start a company.
Yeah. I think for me it's very refreshing to hear what you're saying as an entrepreneur. I mean, as you know, I've been an entrepreneur as well since 2000, and I remember for the Series A of the previous company I had, which was 5-6 years ago, I actually had to go to the Silicon Valley to do to basically talk about Series B.
Yes.
And their condition was like, okay, Alexis, sounds great, we really like it, but you've got to be...
You have to move.
You have to move, and you have to be within the 30 minutes driving distance from where I am, or else there's no way I'm investing. So that's why, to me, it's like really refreshing to have someone like you at the head of such a big VC saying that, and what I really like about what you say is great companies can come from anywhere. And actually, I know that you've, maybe you can tell us a bit more about great companies in which you've invested recently that come from places that one would not expect.
Yeah, sure. So, certainly the thesis that we had great companies coming from everywhere. And actually, the very first investment we did in Atomico was a Madrid-based company. It was FON, Martin Varsavsky's company. It was 10 years ago. And
so
since then...
So you come full circle.
Full circle.
You're back in Madrid,
we used recently, earlier this year, we invested in Job and Talent, which we think is one of the up-and-coming stars in Europe. Obviously from here in Madrid, and Juan and his team, they have a very big global ambition to transform labor market, which is a pretty big market to disrupt, much bigger opportunity than a Skype is. So it's great, but there's also founders who have big ambition, and we're seeing companies in Lisbon, in Uniplaces from Lisbon is a great company as well with international ambitions and already scaling in multiple markets.
What does Uniplace do?
So there's a marketplace for student accommodation.
Okay.
So if you think of students going to a new city to study, they need an accommodation. So Uniplaces is essentially a marketplace where you can find your accommodation, and they also take care of a lot of the onboarding onto your student accommodation.
Okay. And then you also have the investment in Brazil.
Yeah, so Brazil is always, been really interesting for us because you mentioned that earlier on, but Brazil became one of the really big markets for Skype. And we had a lot of users in Brazil, but not a lot of revenue. So we went there and tried to figure things out. And so then we hired Carlos Pires, who then was our country manager, who's been a partner of Atomico in Brazil for many, many years. So we've had presence in Brazil for many years, and primarily because it's a big market, we want companies to expand into the market, but we also made investments there, and of course the economy right now is a bit shaky, but there is a growing tech ecosystem. And one company in particular, what I'd like to highlight is Gympass, because what's specific with Gympass is it's a Brazilian company who started to think global. So they expanded into other Latin American markets, but this year they're expanding into Europe. So they're already in four or five markets in Europe, and this is a new wave where entrepreneurs from Latin America, from emerging markets, thinking beyond the Latin American continent, which is really, really encouraging.
So basically, 3 of your most recent investments are a Spanish company with global ambitions, expanding globally, a Portuguese company with global ambitions, expanding globally, a Brazilian company, global ambitions, expanding globally.
Yeah, all the investments over the
very much in line with South Summit, I would say.
No, but it's no, but it's I think it's for sure we see a lot of great companies here, and also, I think that's also something that much more the last few years. So I would say maybe 10 years ago when we invested in Fon, it was not really a vibrant tech ecosystem, but you're spending the day yesterday here in Madrid meeting a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like the quality is so much better, ambition level is higher. So this is something that certainly is happening. I would say that Northern Europe is maybe a cycle ahead a little bit, where a place like Stockholm has created a lot of fantastic companies, but I think that it's a little bit matter of time, and you need to have these role models. So and if you can see what Martin did with Fon, what Juan is doing with Job and Talent, and some of the others, and then those are role models for other entrepreneurs as well. So we're very, very encouraged about what's happening here in Spain and in Portugal and Brazil for sure.
It's great. Now that's great to hear and refreshing. So coming back to Atomico, what would you say, and I think we touched briefly upon it, differentiates Atomico from other funds in terms of the value add you can bring? Maybe we could go a bit more into detail about that.
Okay, so since we're investing in companies kind of when they are shifting focus from product innovation to expansion, so typically we would invest in like Series A, Series B, or maybe Series C. So one thing that is, we have capital, and
so what's your normal investment, and what's the stage exactly usually?
So well, we like to see that there's like proof that there's a product market fit. So you can see real traction, you can see good cohorts, and so when you're starting to have growth, and the company is then ready to focus on scaling.
Scaling, okay.
And so the teams are usually quite small, and many times have not been part of scaling a bigger organization. So that's why we can have deploy our value creation team. So I mentioned we have people who've been part of scaling companies like Uber, Facebook, Spotify, Skype, Google. And these are people who have really done it themselves. So they can really help and coach. They won't do it for the company, but they will basically think about them as coaches. But I think also what we want to think of is that we want to invest in companies which are also ready to really scale up, and we would typically be quite demanding and with and saying that this is going to be now you have to double down and really focus on growth. So having a lot of people who've been part of scaling these companies are important, but also this whole entrepreneurial founder DNA that we have. In addition to myself, one of our earliest investments was a company called Climate Corporation.
Climate Corporation.
Yeah, so Suraj Khalik, who was the founder, he was an early Google. He was, I think, number 200 at Google, an engineer recruited by Sergey. He and another Googler went out to start this company, Climate Corporation, using big data and machine learning to provide weather insurance for farmers. That was actually one of our really early investments at Atomico. They went out to have $1 billion exit. He then came back to Europe. He was from Europe. So he joined us last year as well. So we have, which is significant because it's important for us to have many founders who have been part of building great companies, because I think that's better resonates in understanding what other founders are looking for.
I mean, the thing that really surprised me from other VCs that I had met with Atomico is that you actually have 40 people in the team. So it's very different to 3 partners, 4 partners, and 2 principals.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Because there's the companies in Europe are really there's so many more companies, they're bigger companies. What we've seen over the years is that there's a big funding gap for companies, after Series A and Series B, and then, as you said, you have to go to Silicon Valley or somewhere else. And that's something that we're addressing, so we have a larger fund, so we can invest, not only Series A, but we can invest in Series B and Series C, to really follow the companies as they're scaling. And that's just, so we're trying to, respond to the growth of the European startup scene.
Perfect, excellent. We have 1 minute left, so maybe it's time for one very quick question. But at first I see that after disrupting telcos, you're now disrupting the VC market, so always a disruptor. Last question in the few seconds that we've got left. So yesterday it was the Google keynote, where they say that they decided to move from a mobile-first company to a AI, artificial intelligence first company. I know this is something you're very close, so in 20 seconds, what do you think about that?
Yes, for sure. This is, when we look at what's the biggest disruptive enabling technology in the next 10 years, for sure, is artificial intelligence. Today, because everything is being disrupted, everything is mobile connected, IoT connected, and then we have the cloud, which collects data and so much data. You apply machine learning on this, that's when you can have real disruption. So that makes me extremely excited about the next 10 years. I think we're going to see so many more opportunities in the next 10 years than the last 10 years. And just to finish on this, the most important artificial intelligence company is from Europe.
It's from Europe.
So DeepMind. And when Google talks about AI, they talk about DeepMind. And it's a European company, and actually Europe is really, really good in artificial intelligence.
So AI is the future, Europe is ahead. Anyone who has a great AI startup, you know whom to send your business plans to. Thank you, Niklas.
Thanks,
Thank you
Alexis.
so much.